G'day everyone, welcome to another edition of Chris Rankin's Music Crush. Just making I thought I'd just do a little update of what I've been listening to and just a few gems from my collection. Been listening to a lot of new stuff as I always do, but I'm still waiting on some of the physicals of those, so I can't really show you those. The new Almach album, I think that's how you pronounce it. They're a band from Kabul, Afghanistan, black metal band, really good stuff. Need, progressive metal album. It's really good. John Voyager's vocals just really impressing me a lot. The new Soen album is very good. Imperial is the name of the album, and also the new Hulder album. I think that's how you say it as well. It's a black metal band, really interesting sort of sound and so forth. So yeah, some of the new releases. I've been listening to a lot of new releases. There was a ton of new releases that came out on Friday just past. But I'm going to show you just what I've been listening to as far as from my collection goes, which is probably a bit more interesting as I can show you physical things. So let's get started. So first of all, this one, that's why it's good to watch other people's channels, because sometimes when I don't really ever need much inspiration to take something out of my collection and listen to, but sometimes you watch other channels and oh yeah, that's right, I've got that, and you decide to take it out of your collection and have a listen to it again. And so I was watching Ron Haggerty's channel, fantastic channel. I'll put a link in the description to link to his channel, and he showed his Stixx Grand Illusion album. So I to be honest, I don't really need much inspiration to play this. I think it's one of the best albums ever made. But I thought, yeah, why not? I'll take that out and have a listen. This is my 2015 reissue that I got pretty much then when it came out. Just a brilliant album. I grew up listening to, certainly in the 80s, certainly the bigger songs. But yeah, just love this album so much. Come Sail Away, of course, that fantastic chorus. Miss America's got that sort of hard, crunchy sort of rock to it. Fooling Yourself has got that wonderful big sort of, I suppose, hook chorus, you could call it. It's just very catchy. What else we got? Superstars, all those big harmonies, and of course the big castle walls and into the grand finale. The Grand Illusion, of course, just a brilliant opening track. One of the best opening tracks of all time. I love this album. I absolutely adore this album. Pieces of Eight is also really good. I've got Cornerstone as well, which I don't like. I love it a lot, but not quite as much as Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight. But yeah, Cornerstone is still a very good album. Brilliant band. Stixx, The Grand Illusion, just fantastic. Great Chicago band. Now, what else have I been listening to? Oh, I've got my Thrust record. I show you. Thrust, Fist Held High. Brilliant album. 1984. Is that right? Yeah, 1984. Great. Another band that started out in Chicago. Then they moved to LA, and then there was a little bit of a split in the personnel from memory, but the core of the band stayed in LA. Thrust, Fist Held High. This is their first album. They did have an album that came out last year. I can't remember the name of it. It was okay. I wasn't really that... The Helm of something? The Helm of Ore, I think it was called. It was okay. It was pretty good. So they are still going. They are still releasing albums, kind of sporadically, but they are still going. But this is a fantastic, just straight up heavy metal album. A little bit of, I suppose, US power metal, maybe a little, and speed metal as well. But 1984, you'd expect it with that year, you'd expect that kind of sound. But I love this. Fantastic album. Next, a band that they got lumped into the Seattle sound and grouping, but they were sort of, well, they were in the same state. They were in Washington State, but they were in more of a central Washington state, and you know, just sort of a hard rock band with a lot of melodies. Mark Lanigan's voice, I still think, is one of the best voices ever in music, and unique as well. Like, you just know that's Mark Lanigan. Very melodic, great sounding voice, but he had a little bit of that deepish to it, and a bit of grit and gravel in the voice. And he also didn't sound like all the other vocalists that came out of that sort of, and even though Screaming Trees were kind of grunge, but not completely, didn't really have that vocal sound that a lot of the grunge in the early 90s vocalists had. He was his own sound. And of course, it was the Connor brothers that were the driving force with the band, and I'm talking about Screaming Trees. Now, this is the last album that they released when they were still together. This is 1996. This is Dust. They did release, there was another album that was released, I think it was 2011, that came out with sort of, cutting room floor and B-sides and other things that they had recorded when they were still together but hadn't actually released on an album. But this is the last album that they released still together. So this is 96. They broke up maybe 1 or 2 years after this. It wasn't long. But this is my favourite Screaming Trees album. I absolutely love this album. The song on here, Halo of Ashes, it's got such a massive hook and very, very catchy. It kind of sounds a little bit folky, like a hard, fast rocking but folky sound, but I wouldn't call it a folk song, not at all. Just the way it starts and its big chorus, and Mark Lanigan really letting you know how he feels. Excellent band, brilliant album. If you've only ever heard one song by Screaming Trees, you probably would have heard Nearly Lost You, which was one of their big hits. And you kind of liked it, but thought, it sounds a little bit like everything else of that era. Then I invite you to listen to this album. Really, really excellent album of just straight up good hard rock with a lot of little things mixed in. A little bit of progressiveness, but I certainly wouldn't call it progressive rock, not at all. But they certainly do stretch out and try quite a few things on here. So, Screaming Trees, Dust. Now this album, I'll show it to you first. So it's Sanctum, Believers. Now, my copy is not. I got this last year. There was a very limited run last year of 500 copies, and it was the first ever reissue of this EP. Now, the original CD, this band only ever made one album, which was an EP. It came out in 1991. So the band is Sanctum, a New Jersey band. It's sort of a power metal. That's pretty close. I think power metal is probably the best way to describe it. And the original copy of this CD I've seen on Discogs regularly go between $800 to $1,000 for a copy. So it was always considered one of the rarest CDs. And then last year I got a notification. I can't remember what label I got it on. No, I can't really remember now, but it was a distro or a label that I sort of get notifications from when they have things come up, and I got a notification from them that they were doing a limited reissue. It only came 500 copies, and I jumped on it instantly. It's a really good album, a really, really good power metal album, US power metal. So it's got a little bit of grunt to it, and it's now the reissue, because the original one was only an EP, and the reissue they've added a whole lot of other songs on here, which must have been other things that they hadn't released already. And as you can see there, I'll try not to get the shine on it. You can see even this one, which is the reissue, my number there out of the limited copies. So who knows, they may not do another reissue for another 20 to 30 years. But yeah, I was very happy to get this, and this is a very highly cherished CD, even if this is only the reissue. Next, a band that I've shown their other album a fair few times, so I thought I got this out to listen to, and so I thought, yeah, I'll show you this, because you might think that this band only ever had one album that came out. Now this is their first album, and I'm talking about the band of Mitochondrion, band from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. This is their first album. I've always tried saying it as Archeon. I think that's how you say it, Archeon. I might be wrong, it might be Archeon. Yeah, it could be that. This one, it's still death metal, like the Parapsignosis that I always show you. But this one does have a little bit of black metal in it. The whole structure of the music and the song still sounds death metal, absolutely, but there's a little bit more of a frightening, chaotic, evil sound to this one. Into the Pit of Babel is one of the most frightening metal songs you'll ever hear. It is just magnificent. It just sounds so nasty, and just, yeah. It's the sort of song that and even this album, it's the sort of album that you want to listen with all the lights turned on. You don't want any open bottles of dairy in case it turns them sour. It's that sort of album. I love this band. They've only ever released 2 albums. And when did this one come out? This one came out, I think it was 2009. I might be a little bit wrong there. It was 2008, 2009 maybe. And Parapsignosis was 2011. They've only released 2 albums. Apparently they are still together. It would seem that they are still together. It would be great if we got a new album from them. So Mitochondrion, Archeon, and this is their debut album. If you like death metal, black metal, or any sort of extreme metal, this band, if you've never heard them, they should be very, very high on your list to hear. They are definitely one of my favourite bands of all time. Number 6, another Canadian band. So we've had 2 bands, Chicago. We've had 2 bands, Canada. This band is from Edmonton, Canada. And I'm talking about Striker. Great band, great sort of, modern day traditional heavy metal band. I wouldn't really say they're traditional heavy metal, actually. They're, not at all. They're speed metal, heavy metal. But they're sort of part of that whole big, strong wave of bands that, could well and truly have been in the 80s. But they're a very modern sounding band. Even though the music style is sort of, 80s in its core, it's good modern production. It's nice and heavy. The thing I love about this album is it's full of money riffs. There are just big hook money riffs all throughout this album. Just so good. If you remember, I think it was 2019, they had an album called Play to Win. And that finished very high on my end of year list for albums of 2019. And have a look at that cover. Armed to the Teeth is the name of this album. Absolutely brilliant. Lethal Force is probably my favourite song on the album. It Could Be Worse, another ripper, another absolute ripper. Land of the Lost as well. Big money riffs, just all throughout. Good catchy choruses, but still a lot of grunt, a lot of crunch. Excellent speed metal album, heavy metal album. Now, band from Perth, my hometown of Perth. This band only ever released 1 EP. I think, even within Perth, I think they're one of the most underrated bands to ever have come out of Perth. Just magnificent. Probably the best way to describe them is a mixture of melodic death metal, but kind of light, like a light melodic death metal and groove metal. The big groovy hook riffs that, man, you just want to hear over and over again. And I'm talking about the band Let's Kill Uncle. I always remember the first time I ever saw Let's Kill Uncle, and the vocalist came up on stage and said, from the Perth Hills, the metal band from the Perth Hills, and then called out the name. It was just interesting to describe a band from the Perth Hills in such a way. Let's Kill Uncle, only 4 songs. The Rise and Fall has one of my favourite riffs of all time. I absolutely adore it. It just grabs you in, and involuntary headbanging is definitely coming along. Never Again also. Just 4 songs. This is all they released, and I love it to bits. One of my favourite Australian records of all time. Yeah, they came back at the start of last year, 2020, and did a reunion show or a reunion set for a gig. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it. I was really sad that I couldn't make it along to that. I was working that day. But yeah, great band. Let's Kill Uncle. So good. Next up, band from Jakarta, Indonesia. I've got quite a lot of albums from heavy metal bands in Indonesia, quite a large collection. So yeah, it's pretty regularly that in my group of albums and music that I'm listening to, there will be a band from Indonesia in that group. And at the moment I'm listening to a band called Serengi, and the album is called Tyran. Absolutely fantastic stoner metal band. Really good stoner metal band. They're from Jakarta. Now this album came out in 2012. They have had another one since, Seperti Api, and well, this one, or maybe the first one, Serigala Militia. Maybe Serigala Militia is probably my favourite over all of theirs. Stoner metal, but sometimes they, on their choruses, they'll have the gang vocals, but the punk style gang vocals on some of the choruses. But their guitar sound is just meaty. It's really meaty, and the riffs just really grab you, and it's the fist pumping sort of, yeah, I've got to listen to that. You know, it really grabs you in. Lagu Lama is one of my favourite songs on here. Dilarang di Bandung, another fantastic song. Serengi, Taring from Jakarta, Indonesia. Nice album cover too. I've seen them quite a few times live. So good live. Really good live. Next. First of all, I love that cover. I'm a massive science fiction fan, sci-fi fan, any of that sort of stuff. I'm just a sucker for in all its forms. So album covers like that are always going to grab me. Now this is Savage's second album, Hyperactive. Loose and Lethal is still a very big grail on my list. I know I'll see it somewhere. I know I'll see it around. It's a very big grail on my list. I know the album well. I used to have it on cassette. I used to have this on cassette back in the day as well, back in the 80s. Now this is 1985. Now technically they get classed as a new wave of British heavy metal sound, and you know, you're starting to get a little bit late, aren't you, for 1985? There are a couple of songs on here, and I'm not saying that they're copies in any way, but there are certainly some songs on here that have a little bit of the Def Leppard Pyromania era sound on here, for sure. Really good album. Quite melodic, quite very easy to listen to, very accessible. Still heavy enough, not overly heavy, but still heavy enough. Still got some good big crunch riffs and so forth. Eye for an Eye, one of my favourites. What else we got? Blind Hunger is one of my favourites on here. Cardiac is another really good one. And what is it? I can't see because of the hair. Gonna Tear Your Heart Out. I didn't want to get one of the words wrong. Gonna Tear Your Heart Out is probably the heaviest song on the track and quite fast. So there we go, that's Savage's second album. Savage from England, new wave of British heavy metal. Hyperactive is the name of the album. Also, been listening to a bit of ZZ Top. When I was quite young, ZZ Top were definitely one of my favourite bands. My first big major concert that I ever went to in 1987, I saw ZZ Top. That was on the Afterburner tour, and I love Afterburner. I know some people didn't like the bit more commercial sound and the synthesizers and all, but I just loved it. Sleeping Bag is one of my favourite songs of all time. And especially, you know, when you're a 12-year-old, I was 12 in 1986, when you're a 12-year-old and you see that music video for Sleeping Bag, that helped a lot as well. You know, remember all the songs, Velcro Fly. But anyway, I'm talking about a different album here. But ZZ Top, along with all my strong metal loves of the late 70s and early 80s when I was a young kid, ZZ Top were one of my favourites. And they'll always be dear to me because, as I say, they were my first big major concert that I saw in 1987 at the Perth Entertainment Centre. Such a brilliant show. But the one I've been listening to at the moment is ZZ Top's first album. Great album. Absolutely fantastic album. This is a 2017 reissue of their 1970 album, just called ZZ Top's first album. I mean, Brown Sugar would have to be one of the best, for me, one of the best hard rocking blues songs ever. It's just magnificent, especially that middle, once it gets into the middle and until the end, where the riff gets the rhythm sort of gets a little bit heavier and a little bit crunchier, is so good. Going Down to Mexico, another absolute cracker of a song. And on the other side, Neighbour Neighbour, another really good. And you know, for its time, 1970, and considering it's kind of a blues rock sound, it is still reasonably heavy for that time. Great album. If you only know the later ZZ Top albums, I would really invite you to go back and either just listen or get some of these earlier albums. There's still a few of the later albums, the 90s albums that I don't have, that I'm looking for, but I've got pretty much everything else ZZ Top's ever done. That little band from Texas, yeah. Now, as I've shown in a couple of videos before, slowly, I've only got a few little holes left in my Voivod collection before I'll have all the studio albums that they've done. And last week, went to a record store that I normally go to, Rhubarb Records in Victoria Park, and I picked up a copy of Voivod Infinity. And I was actually looking online on Liam's online store for the what he has, and I saw this and I didn't want anyone else to have a chance to get it, so I bought it online so I could pick it up. So now I've only got 3 left to go to complete all the studio albums of Voivod. So that's Voivod Infinity. This is a 2009 album, and this is a double disc record, Infinity. Brilliant. I must admit, of all the Voivod albums, I mean, I know the songs and I've listened to them quite a few times. This is the first time I've ever owned it as a physical. Never had it on CD or anything at all. So I'm really enjoying listening to this. It's almost like it's a brand new release for me. I knew the songs well and remember that I loved the album. And of course, I've listened to it online a few times and so forth. But yeah, it's really good when you sort of have those last couple or few albums in a discography of band, and then you're playing those that you didn't know quite so well. And it's almost like listening to a brand new release by a band. So I've been really enjoying listening to this Voivod Infinity. So now the only ones I've got left are Target Earth, Katorz and Phobos. they're the only Voivod albums I've got left to go, then I'll have the complete set. And lastly, a bit of jazz. Jazz is, how can I put this? Okay, so it's something that I love, and I'm loving more and more and more and more, even more as I listen to it. When I was very young, my dad being in a rock and roll swing band in the late 50s and early 60s, obviously some of their sound was jazz as well. So when I was little, in the late 70s and early 80s, my dad would always play me jazz records, and I liked it then. I did. I really quite liked it. I didn't quite understand it, but I liked it. And then as you sort of get teenager and older, you sort of move away from those things, which was a mistake a little bit. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, probably about then, maybe a little bit longer, but about 7 or 8 years ago, I rediscovered it again, and yeah, I love it. And quite regularly now, when I go into a record store, just as much as I go to the heavy metal section and the hard rock and the prog and the 70s section, I definitely always go over to the jazz section as well, and just have a good look. I've got my list of things that I want to get. I'm getting an okay jazz collection. I've probably got about, 40, 45 jazz records now. So, I'm getting there, just slowly building. I'm not just going to grab everything I see. I'm still going to try and pick things that I've either seen or heard that are good. Of course, Aaron the Metal Theologian is always my go-to guy for helping me, or looking at his collection to see what titles are good and what he talks about. So I'll leave a link to his channel in my video as well, because he's if I say the guru, that sounds a little bit corny, but he just, I don't know what other word to say, because when you watch his channel, you find out so many great things, and especially about jazz. But I think what's good for me about watching him talk about jazz is that at the heart of him, he's a metal guy, so he's a metal guy talking about jazz. So I feel like it's coming from the same angle that I'll be looking at it. So that's why it's really cool for me to watch and work out. But anyway, this is the record that I've been listening to lately. Charles Mingus. Look, of course I love Coltrane, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, Herbie Hancock, Art Blakey, all these guys. I love them all. But you know what? Sun Ra as well, and Sun Ra I'm really still kind of in my infancy of getting into. I have probably about 4 or 5 Sun Ra records now. But Charles Mingus might actually be my favourite overall, I don't know why. When I listen to Charles Mingus, I'm completely... I completely dive into his world. I just feel like it completely surrounds me and holds me in, and then just says, you know what, completely forget about the world outside and just listen to me. And I'm just blown away. This is my favourite of his so far. The one I'm looking for, and I think many people are, is Blues and Roots. That may be my biggest grail of all at the moment, along with Death Symbolic, I'm thinking, as you all know. Well, Death Symbolic on vinyl anyway. But this is Charles Mingus, Aham. And I just love this. I love this. This is just, for me, it's perfect. I just put this record on, and it's pure escapism in every way. This was a reissue 2009. It's a Spanish pressing on a label called Jazz Wax record, 2009 reissue, and this is a 1959 album by Charles Mingus. Absolutely love it to bits. So yeah, my jazz collection is growing, and it's nice. It's nice when you sort of have, I've been listening to metal for well over 40 years now, hard rock, prog, all that sort of stuff, pop of course. So I know it extremely well, and although I'm still always learning new things, and I think that's the biggest secret to music, is you always act like you're a dry sponge, and you always want to learn more and find out more new things. But jazz, I wouldn't say it's the new toy, because it's been around. It's been heavily back into my life like for about the last 7 or 8 years, but it still has that new shine where you're really digging and diving deeper, and it's like you've been swimming at the top of the swimming pool, and for the first time now you're diving right down to the bottom to see what could be down there. Maybe someone's dropped a $2 coin down the bottom and you found it, and that's what jazz is. So absolutely fantastic album. And yeah, he might be, I know Miles Davis and Coltrane are the ones that we should say are our favourites, and I love them very much, there's no doubt about it, but I think Charles Mingus and Sun Ra would probably be my 2 favourites so far. So there we go, Charles Mingus, great record. So there we go. That's just a little bit of things I've been listening to. Love to know what you've been listening to lately. Let me know in the comments, that would be good. I'm always interested to see what other people are listening to. It's just a big old world of music, and we never get tired of searching and finding and sharing and so forth. So hope you enjoyed the video. Really appreciate you watching and coming by, and if you've subscribed to me, I really appreciate that. It means so much to me that people can even take any bit of time out of their day to watch my videos. I'm just sort of showing them, telling you about the things I've been listening to, so I really appreciate you watching. So I'll catch you all soon.